I'm Adam Sexton, filling in for Josh McKelvin this morning. Last week saw the House GOP caucus choose Representative Sean Jasper for Speaker for the first time, even though the Hudson Republican has already been Speaker for 2 years. If, as expected, he wins the full House vote for Speaker this week, he'll be carrying the GOP agenda in a legislative body that is always full of surprises, no matter who is in charge. Joining us today to look at the upcoming session are New Hampshire House Speaker Sean Jasper and House Democratic Floor Leader Dan Eaton, representative from Stoddard. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And you two have been walking the halls of the State House together for just a few years.
Just a few, yeah. I think we first met, it'll be 33 years in January.
Yeah.
We were on Judiciary together.
Wow. So a lot of institutional knowledge here. But first, more current events. Speaker Jasper, you just won over that House GOP caucus last week. You're headed to a second term as Speaker when you said you thought you would be one and done at this time last year. How did you pull this off?
Well, I think it was just through consistently working with the members to provide the quality leadership that they were looking for, to be fair, to give people the time that they needed to be comfortable with me as Speaker, and I think I just gave them what the House really needed, brought back some decorum and fairness.
And Representative Eaton, in 2014, Democrats were willing to intervene on Organization Day to sway the vote, essentially. Any sense that there's a similar sentiment going on this time around?
I don't think so. I think the voting bloc has tightened up, and that seeing the dissension in the Republican caucus at the early stage, that the Democrats are going to ride this out and see where it goes. My friend Landslide has some work to do between now and next Wednesday.
Clear, looking from the LSR, is that one of the big conversations we're about to have is about voting and voting registration at the State House for citizens here in New Hampshire, and same-day registration specifically. Speaker Jasper, do you think people here in New Hampshire should be able to register to vote on the same day that they vote?
I would rather that they couldn't. I'm not a big fan of motor voter. I was involved back in '93 as the majority whip in working with then Senator Gregg to give New Hampshire the exemption so we didn't have to go on motor voter. I'm willing to have the discussion. I know that Governor Sununu, Governor-elect Sununu is looking in that direction, and we'll be having conversations there. We definitely need to tighten things up. Not only is it a problem in a matter of perception, it's a real problem for the poll workers. It really has created some issues at the polls on voting day, and we need to look at that whole issue.
Representative Eaton, from the Democratic caucus perspective.
Completely disagree with that sentiment. I've been a moderator for 40 years, and as far as difficulty at the polls, I haven't seen it, even when we've had this past election, one of the largest influx of same-day registration that were certainly for the Republican side. But if you want to avoid motor voter and people registering at the Department of Health and Human Services and Department of Motor Vehicles when the Republicans were in control, that was their fear, that the Democrats were going to be swarming to vote in these different places, which wouldn't occur either. But you need to stick with what we've got, which has worked.
You talk about motor voter. This is essentially the federal mandate that kicks in if you decide not to do same-day registration. You have to make it available through the DMV. This is going to create a different set of headaches for us administratively, trying to figure out how that works.
That's correct, and we did see some states where people thought they had registered, and when they actually got to the polls, their names were not there. It would probably be a very expensive process for New Hampshire to adopt motor voter, and so that's why I say this is an issue that we're going to have some serious discussions on. There are certainly some other things that we're going to be working on in terms of defining domicile. We'll be looking at the issue of having a 15 to 30 day residency requirement before you can vote here, things like that.
There's always a lot of grumbling from the Republican side about college students who, in theory, if they're from out of state, they still live most of the year here in New Hampshire. How do you navigate on this one in terms of?
Well, I look at this in terms of being an issue of where you have a right to be. A dorm is not a domicile in that, to me, and I think to most people, a domicile is where you can stay. You have a right to be there. The universities don't fall under landlord-tenant laws. They essentially close the dorms for holidays. You can't be there for an uninterrupted period of time. And the same is true in many of our summer condo associations, where they don't open up for the whole year. they close down. So I want to look at it in terms of domicile. Where do you have the legal right to be without interruption for half a year plus a day?
Representative Eaton?
You can't have one set of rules for college kids and a different set of rules for snowbirds. In reality, the college kids are probably spending more time in residence in the state of New Hampshire than the snowbirds are, who are spending 6, 7, and 8 months down south. And the college kids are paying rent. It's not like they're getting a free room. They're paying rent. They actually pay for all the dorms that are built with a profit margin.
One of the more interesting dynamics in this upcoming session will be the fact that for the first time in a while, there's not going to be a veto threat looming for Republicans from the corner office there. So constitutional carry, right to work, there's a long laundry list legislatively that could pass pretty quickly. As Speaker, do you have to be careful about how you go about this in terms of process, or is it full steam ahead with that Republican agenda?
Well, the first thing we're going to obviously be doing is developing our Republican agenda in the House, and that'll be the job of the majority leader. The role of the Speaker is really comes into play after the House takes a position, after that first vote. But we'll certainly be working with the governor to see what his priorities are and see if they fit within our agenda, and hopefully we all get on the same page and move forward. But at this point, the Republicans haven't caucused and set their agenda, and we haven't met with the governor, and that will be our highest priority, to do that and figure out where we want to go. I don't think there's any doubt that things like constitutional carry will be at the top of everybody's list, and that would probably go sailing through the House as it has in the past. So I think that's something you can probably count on.
We've heard from Democrats, though, at least in the Democratic Party, remember a press release saying they're counting on legislative overreach by Republicans. Is that, you guys are going to be in the minority, Representative Eaton? There's not much you can do except debate and oppose, but is that something you guys are counting on too, overreach?
We're expecting that there's going to be an attempt, and not necessarily on the part of the Speaker, but he has members of his caucus who have their own agendas and will be looking at overreach. New Hampshire is a very purple state now, and if there is huge overreach, the midterm elections will pay a price. As far as the governor is concerned, I served under the governor-elect's father, and he was someone, while there's a lot of people that think he was always in conflict, he was someone you could talk to and someone you could negotiate with, and I'm assuming the governor-elect will be the same.
You mentioned this is a purple state. Nowhere is that more evident than in your hometown of Stoddard. I took a look at the ballot yesterday for you. Stoddard voted for Trump, Van Ostern, Ayotte. They just crisscrossed the ballot all the way down, and then you ended up being the leading vote getter about 7 slots down the ballot. Is there, for both of you gentlemen, a consciousness that, really, no matter, even though there's a majority and minority in the State House, this state really is sort of all over the place with its, especially in Stoddard, Representative?
Having been a moderator for 40 years, I've never seen a ballot like this in my life, and we just finished a whole bunch of recounts and looking at ballots from all over the state. It was the exact same thing. They went everywhere. It is a purple state, and the loyalty, party loyalty, seems to be gone.
And how do you represent that from a leadership position?
Well, I think that's where, as Speaker, you look at what the House wants. What are the votes in the House? And you talk about overreach, and that is certainly something that I'm concerned about, because we've seen that from both parties as we've gone back and forth. And that's going to be a top priority of mine. I'm sure it's going to be a top priority of the governor's, to make sure that we have a carefully crafted agenda that doesn't attempt to go too far in one direction, because to a large degree we are a purple state. Now, if you looked at the ballot in Hudson, you didn't see that back and forth. You saw as strong a Republican vote as you really could, which is interestingly true of most of the large communities in southern New Hampshire, where people talk about people moving up from Massachusetts. Well, they're moving into those communities and they're voting solid Republican.
In the same vein there, the stylistic issues and whatnot, you said that one of the reasons you believe that the Republicans held the House on November 8th was the willingness to keep Medicaid expansion in place. It's possible now that the folks at the federal level are going to take care of that problem for you, but obviously hand you a different set of headaches, perhaps. Is there a sense of what will happen if Obamacare is repealed at the federal level and we're still here with our Medicaid expansion? I
haven't even begun to think about that. I'm just hoping that they deal with this on a federal level. It's clearly, to me, not fiscally sustainable, and they have to figure out how to make health care work in a way that people can afford it.
And Representative Eaton, is there a transition to this, or it just goes away?
The rumor is this transition. I think there's a concern at the moment, and I could be mistaken. Last I checked, there has not been a bill introduced as of yet to continue Medicaid expansion past the deadline. So that needs to be looked at fast and furious in anticipation of anything the feds do.
And Representative Eaton, we have marijuana policy changing all around us in terms of on our state lines on almost every side. Should New Hampshire do something bold and just try to capture what it can of what is likely to be a legal cannabis market sometime in the next couple decades, perhaps?
In the next couple decades, yes. And the initial part, I think, would be to decriminalize, and New Hampshire's always been one step at a time, and that would be the first step, and then see what happens with our neighbors if it has any problems that are unanticipated, and then progress from there.
And Speaker Jasper?
Well, Dan and I were on Judiciary Committee together when actually we did pass a decriminalization bill in 1985.
I've heard there are legends of this, that it was on the consent
calendar.
It was on. It did pass. It was not pulled off consent. It passed the House on consent.
Yeah.
When did they find out what they had done, though?
Well, the union leader found out, and then the Senate
hey, what the hell was that?
And these young bucks were like, oh, they did.
But the issue that I think remains is the issue of driving under the influence of marijuana. There is no real test, and if it's legal, then what do you do? I mean, and clearly that is becoming a problem in the states that have legalized it. You know, we see that all over the place. We see that we still clearly do not have the issue of driving while impaired, whether it's alcohol or drugs, under control. And until we have a reliable test, legalization is the wrong thing to do, because that will become an issue as it is in other states, and I'm sure they're going to be seeing that in Massachusetts and Maine and I know in Colorado. I've spoken with the speaker there who was not happy with what they did and has seen they've seen some unintended consequences.
And now perhaps on our state line areas as well, we'll see Maine, Massachusetts.
We're going to be absorbing that completely.
Gentlemen, thanks so much for your time, and we'll be seeing lots of you under that beautiful new Golden Dome up there.
It is beautiful.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you for your time.